Okay, so Micah chapter 4, and um, we have circled back around from chapter 3 to the accusations and the consequences. Remember last chapter was pretty graphic.
Yeah.
The illustrations used were really pretty rough and awful. Um, the leaders were basically acting like psychotic cannibal criminals, and doing kind of the worst things imaginable. And that was to underscore just how awful they were acting, but also it adds a dimension when the awful actions come from those in positions of authority and responsibility. Now, that does not abrogate your average Joe from this, as the first two chapters have been quite clear. That is a contagious disease that has spread from north to south, and by application from east to west. Everybody has been corrupted by this, and it's a problem. But those who are in charge, those who have people who count on them and depend on them, those who are stewards of authority and responsibility and power, their selfish misuse has extra consequences because it has extra consequences. Um, the uh, the murderer and the mutterer are both guilty of sin that separates them from the fellowship of a holy God, but the temporal consequences of the two can be extremely different. Murderers tend to be avoided because they're jerks. Murderers irrevocably change lives, rob futures, perhaps are incarcerated or even executed themselves. The eternal consequences of sin, small and large, is the same, but our temporal mortal consequences can be pretty wildly divergent, but most especially the greater effects can be had when that sin is coming from the top down. You just have the ability to harm that much more, that many more people, if you are in a position of influence. Okay, so chapter 3 was pretty rough stuff, and now we're going to move on to chapter 4. In the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as the highest of the mountains. It will be exalted above the hills, and the people will stream to it. Many nations will come and say, "Come, let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the temple of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, so that we may walk in his paths. The law will go out from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He will judge many people and will settle disputes for the strong nations far and wide. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. Everyone will sit under their own vine and under their own fig tree, and no one will make them afraid. For the Lord Almighty has spoken. All the nations may walk in the name of their gods, but we will walk in the name of the Lord, our God, forever and ever." So these prophetic words that the Lord wants his people to know, we have already mentioned, kind of um, move from north to south and sometimes include both. Sometimes these are accusations directed to the northern kingdom of Israel. Sometimes these are accusations directed to the southern kingdom of Judah. Sometimes these are accusations directed to all of God's chosen. Sometimes the consequences are the coming calamities to their nations and kingdoms. The conquering by Assyria, the Babylonian captivity. Sometimes these consequences are referencing the capital D day of the capital L Lord, which means an eschatological end of time book of Revelation kind of consequence and judgment. And so it moves from place to place at times, and it occasionally says both. And it bears repeating whenever we get to these chapters of judgment that sometimes the judgment, the temporal judgment, is directly likened to the eternal judgment because they are related. They're not identical, but they're connected. Again, to talk about the murderer and the mutterer, the temporal judgment of those two are widely divergent, but both of them are negative. And both of them can be likened to the eternal judgment of being separated from the presence of God. As the murderer is shunned from friends and family for being a jerk, that's a small, tiny taste of what the abject hell of separation from God will be like one day. When people lose friends and family, when people stop talking to each other, that sort of hurt can be described in some pretty apocalyptic terms. It doesn't mean that the apocalypse has actually happened within your family, but in many ways we feel that. We feel enough of a connection to use language that mentions just how incredibly dire this is, because these things are important to us and these consequences are real. So I'm going to say that the vision that we're given is less temporal and more eschatological here in the beginning of chapter 4. And part of that is because it starts off with in the last days. That should give us a clue. Now, I don't think that's a dispositive clue. Meaning, I don't think that settles the argument just by saying, oh, the last days, that clearly means the eschaton, the end of times, book of Revelation. Well, yes and no. We can also talk about the last days of the kingdom. We can talk about the last days of many things and not necessarily refer to the last day of God's creation. But when we read the description of what's going to happen, I think we should get a sense of the bigger picture and the wider scope. Just to say that no one will fight war anymore. Okay, that's like an end of time kind of thing, not a when Babylon comes to town.
Right.
So we are now, if we've got one eye on the present and one eye towards the future, this is a future vision of that more book of Revelation, eschaton, end of the world, day of the Lord. And but it's one of the things where we've talked about how in all the prophecies basically will have an element of judgment and consequence and the call for repentance, but also there will be the conclusion of hope. It is a holy remnant. It's a promise of restoration. It's grace and redemption. It's something. So these prophetic words will move back and forth between the calamity you're facing here and now because you have been disobedient and you're going to be in trouble. And it will also move to how the sin of the world, of humanity as it continues, also has an end point and also has a judgment. And yet in that judgment, the same way that in the temporal part, there's the hope and the restoration. A faithful remnant will come back, the land will be restored, whatever it is. The hope that comes in the eschaton is God's eternal glory, his redemption of the world, his putting things right forever and ever and ever. Amen. So the kingdom of God established in its fullness of joy are the sorts of things that we can then connect the end of human warfare to, and not the vision of a faithful remnant coming back and rebuilding Jerusalem one day, because there's still going to be war. Right? So already, because we're given some of these line items, the future eye is maybe the one that's the clearest right now. We're talking about our temporal consequences are related to eternal consequences, and our temporal hope is also related to our eternal hope. The mountain of the Lord's temple will be established, and the highest of the mountains will be exalted above the hills, and the people will stream to it. Is this a physical mountain? Which mountain is it? Is it metaphorically Mount Zion, which is considered God's holy mountain there in Jerusalem, because that is his holy city? That is also the location of a temple. I think this is talking more about Mount Zion, but it's doing so in a very metaphorical sense. Mount Zion is not very high. It's not much of a mountain at all. I mean, not in comparison to what else we would call a mountain. What's that movie from like 30 years ago? The man who went up a hill and came down a mountain.
The Englishman.
Yeah, the Englishman. Yes, very sweet movie,
yeah,
right?
It's a really cool movie, yeah.
But it all had to do with there are official designations for certain geographical features. And if you meet the qualifications, you're one. And if you don't meet it, you're the other. And, so mountains seem more impressive than hills. So that's why people in Central Florida stream to the majestic peak of Mount Dora. Whatever. I like to remind people that in Broward County, the highest peak we called Mount Pompano, which was the local landfill. But was technically the highest geographical peak in Broward County. Anyway, the highest in this regard, I'm going to throw out a couple of just random thoughts for a second. The highest in this regard could be purely metaphorical, that regardless of height, this is about highest in the sense of most glorious. When we talk about the highest of the highs, we don't necessarily mean with a tape measure. We mean something transcendent. So the mountain of the Lord will be exalted above the hills. So it's not necessarily that it's taller physically than all the others, but something about it draws your eye and attention, and it stands out and shines in God's glory. I want to throw out one more thing. Because in this time, we are given a different hope, but of a similar theme or time frame, that every valley will be raised up, and every mountain and hill will be brought low. The crooked places will be made straight. So, will this mean a geographical change in the surface? I don't know. But this is the reordering of the world that will happen in its ultimate redemption. Come, let us now go to the mountain of Jacob, to the temple of the Lord, of the God of Jacob. Again, that could be located somewhere else, but I kind of feel like, why would it be? Why not? We've been talking about Zion already. We've been talking about Jerusalem. So relocating the temple seems superfluous at this point. It seems to be all part of a very similar theme. So we are talking about God's holy city, not just as a geographical location, but as the nexus of his presence. He will teach us his ways so that we might walk in his path. The law will go out from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem, judge between many peoples. What is present in the Holy of Holies will spill out and touch all the world, all the tribes and languages and tongues and nations. We have a brief foretaste of that in the crucifixion of Christ, when the temple curtain is torn in two from top to bottom. The temple curtain, which was the separating barrier where the Holy of Holies, where the presence of God was on earth, where only the high priest was going to go once a year, and the people could be in the temple, but they were always physically separated from that which was too holy for them to be around and live. Remember that when the high priest would go and make his appointed rounds, they would tie a rope around his ankle. So if he died, they could pull him back and get rid of the body. He wouldn't be stuck. So in the crucifixion and death of Christ, sometimes referred to as the great democratization of the Spirit, that separating barrier is torn, it's opened, it's rent, so that nothing separates the holiness of God's presence from his people. And this is kind of like a vision of that. What does it mean? That no matter where you lived, what culture, what kingdom, even what God you had followed, you now stream, you come, you're inexorably drawn to Jerusalem and the temple and the presence of God, his judgments, him teaching his law has now come to you because you have come to him. Whenever there is that God will teach his law, there is, I think we need to see an intimate connection there. It is not an indirect thing to teach someone. If I write a set of instructions and I leave it for you and you pick it up later and go over it, that's not really teaching. Teaching is me being with you. I'm going to explain it to you. I'm going to show you. I'm going to answer your questions. We're going to interact. When the schools got shut down during COVID and like, oh, we're just going to do everything online, some kids did fine. A couple of my kids hated it. Poor Nathan. He would have to watch like a lecture for a class. He would watch that video 3 times, trying, but he could not stay focused on the screen and get the content that he needed, because he needed the human interaction.
Right.
He needed the very occasional glance of a real person, and they can just like, you see them, they see you, and now they keep moving on. But in that moment, you had the half second of, this is a real person, I'm a real person, this is a real connection, this is really happening. And that was critical. So we've got a generation that we don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
You know, we've seen sociologically that there have been some lingering effects. How much, how widespread, nobody really knows. But we can see in other ways where a generation that has been raised here, rather than here, like their social skills are stunted. They don't date. They are weird around each other. They are socially awkward in ways that we've never seen as widespread before. We always had people who were less adept at interacting than others, and that's just, everybody's unique. But we have a whole generation where they have not been continually exposed to this stuff that we completely took for granted. To go play with a friend meant to go run around outside.
Oh, yeah.
To meet someone meant to shake their hand and look them in the eye. You know, if you wanted to say something mean to someone, you had to say it to their face.
Yeah.
And kind of deal with the consequences one way or the other.
Not like,
So,
texting.
right.
Or, you know,
They knew who said it.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, again, he in some ways really was a wise philosopher. Mike Tyson made a comment about something like an awful lot of people have gotten comfortable making insults with people they don't see face to face. You know, because you can't get punched in the head if you are writing something nasty online, and that's just become it's become a habit. It's just become a daily part of life. It's just what you do. Whereas whether it was good or whether it was bad, you tempered your words when you spoke to somebody face to face, because maybe you didn't want to get into a physical fight, or this is maybe the best, most significant part of it. I may not be worried that Sharon is going to punch me in the face if I say something mean to her. But can I look her in the face? Can I look her in the eye and say something that might make her cry? Do I really want to do that? Like, I really have to think twice. And if I see it starting to happen, oh, no, I didn't mean that. Right? Because now we got to deal with it. As opposed to the anonymity of saying any snarky comment that you feel like.
Right. You want to like not friend somebody on Facebook, you just click.
Right.
But you, in the past, you said, "Oh, I don't want to be your friend anymore."
Right. There was maybe
so and so isn't like
it could have been an altercation or a confrontation or something.
Yeah.
So
just deal with it.
Right.
This the teaching of the law, God will teach us his law, has this very direct, very interpersonal, and very intimate aspect to it. If God is to teach you his law, he is interacting with you. And it's not from afar and it's not abstract. This is not, God does not teach Israel the 10 Commandments. Moses does. God teaches Moses, but only Moses comes down from the mountain glowing because he was in the presence of God. The people are like, this is too much, you know, cover your face. Please, you tell us his words, because if he does, we're all going to die. So for God to teach us is actually a really big deal, because it means that Almighty God, creator of all that there is seen and unseen, is directly interacting with you. But that's part of this promise. So it's kind of exhilarating to think of in those terms. So this again is very interpersonal, interactive, and direct. He will judge between many people. He will settle disputes for the strong nations and the wise. You know, all this has been done through intermediaries. There have been kings, there have been judges, there have been leaders and rulers. But now God himself will very directly rule his people. And you got to think that when God settles a dispute, it stays settled. It was done right and fairly and justly, and it stays settled. And what is the implication of that? Well, the implication is warfare is eliminated. And if you don't need to fight, you take the tools of warfare, you take your weapons, and you take what's now become useless, and you turn it into a more useful tool. This has been co-opted in some time frames as a utopian ideal, whether it's the sickle and hammer of communism, or protesters from the 60s and the Vietnam War talking about beating your swords into plowshares or whatever. There's like this element of wishful thinking, maybe, like The communists can take over a nation, but they never got rid of their weapons. Like that stage never occurred, right? And even if the protester got their will and like, okay, well, the U.S. will stop bombing Hanoi or whatever, did both sides suddenly become farmers and cooperative? No. I mean, that's what are the rest of the world, So anyway, it's always kind of seemed a little pie in the sky and utopian, except it's actually a vision of what will happen when God himself directly leads his people, because there really won't be any need for war.
Yeah.
But isn't it interesting that there is no need for war, but there is still need for pruning and for plowing?
Yes.
Remember that in the Garden of Eden, Adam worked.
Right. Yes.
Effort, both physical and creative, apparently is good. Like capital G good, days of creation, God making something and pronouncing it is good. Before the fall, Adam works. In the eschaton, where war is no more, well, it's useless to have a sword because I don't want to stab anybody and I don't need to stab anybody. And I don't even need to defend myself anymore. But what do I need? Apparently, I need farming implements. So does that mean we're not going to push this metaphor until it gets dumb? Okay, so we have to grow food and eat food, and so we're going to potentially, if we don't cook the food, we'll starve and have it. Like, okay, we're getting a little crazy here. But the metaphor, I think, the illustration is there to say when warfare, when conflict is eliminated and warfare is no longer necessary, our humanity will be changed to something that exemplifies peace rather than exemplifies conflict. Everyone will sit in their own vine under their own fig tree. No one will make them afraid. The Lord Almighty has spoken. I see this in a couple of ways. Partly the abundance of God's provision if everyone has their own vine, but also a sense of peaceful security, like growing up at a time where you didn't lock your car and you didn't lock your front door and you could leave your bike out and nobody was going to take it. Like this is, you can sit under your own vine and you have zero worry that anything is going to happen to you or that vine. And that again is a vision of when God rules in our lives and in this world, this is the way it ought to be. This is the ought that we, even if we can't articulate it, that we long for, we desire, and we hope for. When we say, I don't know what's wrong with the world, but something's wrong and this doesn't feel right, it's because we long and we hope and we wait for this. We've been built for this. And until we reach it, we will always be unsettled. I don't know who made this quote. I kind of feel like it was somebody like Thomas à Kempis, maybe. But man is not at peace with his fellow man because he is not at peace with himself. And man is not at peace with himself because he is not at peace with God.
That's right. Right.
But just as it flows in that direction, when we are at peace with God, we will be at peace with ourselves. And when we are at peace with ourselves, we will be at peace with one another. Verse 6. In that day declares the Lord, I will gather the lame, I will assemble the exiles, and those I have brought to grief. I will make the lame my remnant, those driven away a strong nation. The Lord will rule over them in Mount Zion from that day and forever. As for you, watchtower of the flock, stronghold of the daughter of Zion, the former dominions will be restored to you. Kingship will come to daughter Jerusalem. Um, Theologically and thematically, there's often what's referred to in the scriptural story of the great reversal. And that is the poor being satisfied and the rich going away hungry. That is the widows and the orphans being protected by God Almighty. That is the humble who are then exalted, and those who are exalted being humbled. And so in the end, which is the beginning, not just the people who have been exiled are coming back. So there's that, connection to the temporal there. Assyria is coming, Babylon is coming. You're going to know what I'm talking about pretty soon, but you will still return from that. But like the lame, the disabled, the weak, those who struggle, those who are dependent, the people that you assume are the least capable, they will become a strong nation. They will become the new standard. People who have been filled with grief will be filled with songs of joy. Even that which you have lost will be restored. And I really like how it ends in this little brief passage that concludes on 8. This doesn't happen all that often, but it is a metaphor that is used on occasion. But usually we get a lot of Holy Zion and Mount Zion and Holy Jerusalem, daughter Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. And that's not for nothing. Mm-hmm. Because again, that relationship is family. That relationship is close. That relationship is intimate. When we think about fathers to daughters, that is strong. That is protective. That is very deep. Jerusalem, my daughter. Why do you now cry aloud? Have you no king? Has your ruler perished? What the pain seizes you like that of a woman in labor? Writhe in agony, daughter Zion, like a woman in labor, for now you must leave the city to camp in the open field. You will go to Babylon. There you'll be rescued. There the Lord will redeem you out of the hand of your enemies. So we have kind of a natural break here where we have had that future eye looking at the end of things and the beginning of things, but now the present eye is pulling us immediately back because Babylon has been referenced specifically and explicitly, and that is who will bring God's judgment to the southern kingdom of Judah, where Jerusalem exists. It will be Babylon and King Nebuchadnezzar, which will overrun Jerusalem, sack the city, and enslave its people. The best and the brightest of Jerusalem will be carried away into a foreign land. And this is coming. So again, as we flow from the temporal to the eternal, because they are interconnected, and one is like the other. And as much as the first line or the last line to end in 8, and it's getting referenced here, the daughter Zion is still there, it's still referenced. Daughter Jerusalem. This is still intimate and close, but even when judgment comes, and it's going to come bad, be prepared, my daughter. Be ready. And it will be hard. But you will be rescued. And you will be redeemed. The judgment and the hope are intermixed in these verses. And you don't have to go very far at all. Same verse even containing both. The medicine is strong, and it will hurt going down. but it will heal you. But now many nations are gathered against you. They say, let her be defiled, let her eyes gloat over Zion, but they do not know the thoughts of the Lord. They do not understand his plan, that he has gathered them like sheaves to the threshing floor. Rise and thresh, daughter Zion, for I will give you horns of iron. I will give you hooves of bronze. You will break to pieces many nations. You will devote their ill-gotten gains to the Lord, their wealth to the Lord of all the earth. We are back in the temporal, but again, it's this hope is attached to something in the future, not really the eschaton, but moving in that direction. When the Lord rules all, Israel and daughter Zion will not have to fight and beat other nations. Mm-hmm. But maybe getting there, they will still have a role to play. Mm-hmm. The great reversal is referenced here in the context of both the faithful remnant and also the conquered will one day become conquerors. Mm-hmm. You are going to lose. And the other nations will gloat and scoff and mock. Let them. Because they don't realize they are just a tool right now. And the worm will turn. The tables will turn. And you will be my instrument of judgment on them one day, as they are about to be my instrument of judgment on you. Gloating is always a bad idea, just in a practical sense. I'm not a trash talker, not because I don't have the desire to rub it in, because I do, but because I've had too much experience trash talking and it backfiring, that I've just decided, ooh, this is a bad idea. Like I'm playing a sport or I'm doing something against somebody else. Just keep your mouth shut and just do your job. And if you win, awesome. But if you start rubbing it in, you are setting yourself up for such a fall. So these other nations who will be used to execute God's judgment are just that. They are tools. That's one of my oft-repeated C.S. Lewis quotes. There are those who say to God, thy will be done, and those who say, my will be done. The former will be known as God's children, the latter will be known as God's tools, because his will be accomplished regardless. So these nations are not going to win because they're better, they're superior, they're favored. They're going to win because God's will is being worked out, and they are simply a part of it. But again, this will not be your everlasting fate, nor will it be their everlasting victory. The tables will turn, and you will be my instrument of judgment, and those who have scoffed and gloated will get their comeuppance. So this is a very back and forth passage. We're talking about the upcoming exile. We are talking about the end of the world. We're talking about somewhere in between. We are talking about the consequences of the disobedience of a political entity. We are talking about the disobedience of broken humanity as a whole, and something in between. And you know, the heart of prophetic words, in that God is wanting his people to know something, is that we are part of God's people. And so there's something we need to know in this too. Micah did not have you in mind when he wrote these words. Micah had no idea you would exist. Micah wasn't thinking about 21st century America. He wasn't thinking about Polk County or Lakeland. He was trying to convey to the people around him what God wanted them to know. But what Micah doesn't realize is that God intends for all of his people to know. And that means right then when this is written, and that means a couple hundred years later when they're in the thick of the Babylonian exile and returning. And that means a couple of thousand years later when we are talking about Western Europe and colonial America. It means today, it means tomorrow, it means all that stuff until the Lord rules and there is no more conflict. That is one of my favorite philosophical components of the martial art that I teach. So this art has a symbol that it uses like in its not just its typography and its logos, but it's intended to kind of convey the theme of the art as a whole. And at the center of it is a Chinese character, which the Koreans would pronounce mu, but the Chinese would pronounce wu. And it means military or martial, like martial art, which means military art. And it's a Chinese pictogram, and it's kind of this, it looks sort of like a flat backwards J, but it's actually a type of Chinese sword. And then there are these up and down strokes on the sides, and that means stop. And it's a sign that I've been told that exists in contemporary Chinese stop signs. So the literal definition of mu, military or martial, is stop sword or stop conflict. The purpose of a military is not to start a conflict, it's to stop it. Now, one of the ways to stop a conflict is to hit the other guy so hard he stops fighting. That is a way. But at the heart of the art, if that's your understanding of the definition, then it's about making things better, not making things worse. It's about turning the heat down, not turning the heat up. And what I tell them is this art is going to train you as you are training your body to block and to punch and to kick. You are going to be training yourself to not have to block and punch and kick. Because as you train your body, you will be invariably training your mind and invariably training your soul. And the confidence that it gives you, the ability to know that you can handle yourself, that you're able to intervene if necessary, or protect yourself or protect somebody else, and the self-confidence that comes from the skill and the experience and all these kind of things are going to help you stop the conflict in here. As you are training your body, you're training your mind, you're training your soul, and you are more at peace because you can handle yourself. You're less anxious, you're less worried, you're less conflicted. So you're stopping the conflict here. And once you stop the conflict here, you're going to find there's a lot fewer conflicts out there.
That's true.
It's not going to eliminate all of them. But think about it. When you've got a chip on your shoulder, you go through the day seeing fights everywhere.
Yes.
When you feel fear in your heart, you go through the day seeing scary stuff everywhere.
Yes.
But when you feel peace or joy or love, that's what's dominating your heart in that moment. You go through the day and you see all the good things, which were always there. But you weren't really noticing them, or they weren't standing out. So when you stop the conflict in here, there will be far fewer conflicts out there. How are we going to stop the conflict in here? Well, remember, man is not at peace with himself because he's not at peace with God. And in the day of the Lord, when he rules and reigns supreme, not just the world, but us, because he will teach us his law, that is direct, that's interpersonal, that's to you. We will be at peace with God. And then we will, by extension, be at peace with ourselves, and by extension, we will be at peace at one another, and it will be on earth as it is in heaven, with the peace of God, which passeth all understanding. Any questions? Okay, how we doing on Micah 4? We good?
Yeah, it's fine.
All right. Well, we will do Micah 5 next time.